that they pleaded. These were the major banks, not the regional and local banks. They're very safe. So Americans should understand your local, regional banks are fine because of the reserve currencies that were mandated after 2008. What happened is the Goldman Sachs, the Morgan Stanleys, the big unfortunate banks and the corrupt ones now had to put in their own tentacles into the different countries as opposed to going through Britain. Our country did not in any way anticipate that this was happening, despite the fact that I would write repeatedly, both in Cyber Command, Cyber Warfare, and the Net Force series by Tom Clancy. I wrote about it in Op Center when Spain broke out and Barcelona broke away from Spain. I kept saying it for 5 years on the Alex Jones Show that this was the beginning of the end of Europe, because Europe is an artificial construct that has no basis for solidity. It's different national characters, 28 to 29, with one currency. The difference is the United States has one currency for 52 states, and we're unified because it's a republic. There may be attempts at a secession, like Texas or others, but I don't think it will be successful as opposed to devolution of power. So what I've really been talking about, and Alex really pointed this out over the years, is not that the globalists were increasing, is that we have a devolution of power going on all over the world, including the Chinese, who have to centralize power but are fighting their own corruption in the local areas. The yuan is going down. China will not do well in this. They will try to attempt to make the yuan a currency that's an alternate to the American currency or the British pound. That will not happen. The pound will still remain strong. The euro will fall repeatedly because France has a very low growth rate, and it had before France even attempted to stop the Brexit. It already had riots.
What's the calculus on bringing in all the refugees? 5 million from the Middle East. It's got to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions here. They're covering it up. What is the whole point of bringing in people unskilled, 22% that have TB? I mean, this sounds like treason.
Well, the way I looked at it and the way I said it on your show many years ago was that this was Putin's revenge on the takedown of the Soviet Union. When I listened to Putin many years ago, he's a very clever man. He said, imagine what countries are like when you liberate 20 million people and they have no country, i.e. addressing me and others who were involved in the takedown of the Soviet Union. And I realized that he would, in fact, get into the Syrian war to create this conflagration, support Bashar Assad with Iran, and then allow all of these young men to transfer over into Turkey.
Sure, and of course he came out yesterday, Putin, and said this reminds him of the fall of the Soviet Union.
Oh, I didn't know that. You see, I had anticipated it, and I warned our people, but again, they didn't listen. Again, our people, this is the point why you're important and why the American public has to listen to you. We've talked about this for years beforehand. I knew our government was not qualified to answer this. I knew our government was not even capable of anticipating any of these problems and gaming them out. Unlike the Nixon administration, whatever you could say for Nixon, right or wrong, the man was brilliant. He knew exactly how to game out the Chinese, how to game out the Soviets. Even under the Baker administration, we knew how to game out the Soviet Union under Reagan. And this
our elites don't game anybody. They just get bought off for almost nothing. I mean, they give up all the power and sovereignty for like a few $1 million apiece. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, in effect, Alex, there is no more sovereignty, and they have no power. What you saw Obama doing was to really, again, basically self-destruct. He self-destructed with Osama bin Laden nonsense, which didn't exist, the shooting, with Sandy Hook, a false flag, with another false flag. So he will be known as the sociopath that he is. I said it from the day he came in. He was a CIA recruit, a complete sociopath whose only advantage was the
Hey, we know current FBI agents that have investigated Sandy Hook and think it's a hoax. I mean, it's incredible. I'm not going to get into it.
Not only that, the question is, what do we do when we know that our government is tyrannical and is capable of killing us and shooting us? It's not just FEMA. The question is really, when will we protest and how will that protest
But isn't it clear that it's a criminal element inside our government?
Well, the government is criminal. I mean, how do you allow our government to attack the Twin Towers, when you have the CIA, the DIA, the military intelligence, you have the soldiers, you have the police, you have Homeland Security, you have the WASP-trained Mueller who says, oh, no, we didn't know about it, and the FBI, the most self-aggrandized organization other than the CIA, repeatedly making mistakes and confusing the issue and really getting part of the collusion of hitting and hurting.
And then why are they allowing the Islamic invasion? Just so they can have more terror attacks and get more funding? I'm going to ask you that when we come back to Steve Pieczenik's our guest, analyzing the Brexit. All right, final segment with our guest. I was going to take calls the next segment. You know what? I forgot. We've got a reporters down in the valley where they're admittedly bringing in illegal aliens and putting them on buses. Now, we broke that 2 years ago. Nobody else covered it. And that's a big deal. It shows the lawlessness, but now it's on ABC News. So we thought we'd go back down there and show folks. So Jakari Jackson, Don Salazar, and others joining us. Caught red-handed, Border Patrol paying to ship illegals deep in the United States. This is the lawlessness. Look at the Sunday Express headline, European superstate to be unveiled. EU, we told you this last week, EU nations to be, quote, morphed into one post-Brexit. So you don't have an excuse to leave now. We'll fix that problem. So this shows the incredible totalitarian nature. And obviously, this will just accelerate people wanting to leave even more. But what is it about tyrants, Dr. Pieczenik? They just don't get it. They just, it's like, you know, Catalonia or Catalan, one of the only prosperous areas in Spain, its own culture. 90-something% of people voted to leave. Madrid said you can't. They just said, we'll do whatever we want. I mean, how do you stop 90%? You can't control 90% and make them do what you want. You can only kill them.
Yeah, the reason I knew Catalonia would break away from Madrid, number one, Madrid is an artificial construct created by Francis II, a French king. There is no Spain. It's really Valencia, Basque, Barcelona, as you know, and I wrote about Catalan breaking away. The problem in Spain will be that it had a civil war during the 30s, millions died, and it could have another civil war because the Catalans are not Spanish. They will fight if they have to, and Madrid doesn't have a national force that can really counteract it. What happens to tyrants is they see the, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But in that premise, what people don't realize, it's the beginning of the end of the tyrant. The minute the tyrant exercises that kind of absolute power, like Obama's doing, like those henchmen around him, then it becomes the end of their dynasty and then the end of their tenure. What happens? Putin understands very well in the history of the Romanovs and the Tsars and Stalin, the only way the tyrants leave is through assassination or death. There is no other way. In the United States, we either assassinate our presidents, which we've done with LBJ. We had, shootings on, which we did with JFK, and we warned LBJ not to continue, and we told Reagan that he has a problem, and then we went on and so forth. Things just don't happen by chance or accident. Now we have a corrupt government. We have an inept government. That's worse because corruption may be needed in order to get systems going. It's just the degree of corruption. But when you have incompetence to the top, Susan Rice, Samantha Power, the Ben Rhodes, all those people who really have no idea what they're doing, and they stood in one of those think tanks, it's time to get rid of all of them. The Trump attempt to come into the presidency is far more important than people realize, not only because he said the system is rigged, but he clearly articulated in words what you have been doing, what I have been doing, and many millions of others have said. We're disgusted with the rigged system. Nevertheless, the rigged system continues. If Hillary comes in, my suspicion is there will be violence. I can't proffer it, but they know, the people are listening to me, that they were more than effective in handing me subpoenas, or when they felt I was out of control, they sent helicopters above my house to give me a warning. Now, I don't have a problem fighting against for my nation and our republic, because I had to fight overseas. But I call on our military to wake up. I call on our generals to stop worrying about their pensions and their liability. Right now, we have more generals who are on pension than active duty military officers, and that's a crime. And instead, we don't have an army that really is loyal to the republic. What the republic did and Obama did was a very shrewd and clever element. They create strategic tension all over the world so that our military is deployed, not because they have to fight for the republic, but it's a way of getting rid of our military domestically. So we're in 786 bases. Then you asked, why are these false flags occurring? You hit it on the head repeatedly when you said it was to round up our ammunition and guns. But there's a more serious reason and a more perfidious reason that I have maintained throughout, and that is what I wrote in the state of emergency. Our government can no longer justify its existence without creating strategic tension within our country. In other words, the federal government, sui generis, has no legitimacy. It has to create strategic tension so that it can mandate its federal troops.
Sure, it has to make itself the hero and violate jurisdictions. If you could do like 4 more minutes on the other side, I want to ask you, not as a pop psychiatrist, but also a medical doctor, Harvard and MIT trained, I want to ask you just briefly about a Merkel, about an Obama, about, who these people are, why they're so dishonorable, why,
well,
the most scummiest people get in power. Stay right there, Dr. Pieczenik. I'm Alex Jones. And then Jakari Jackson, Don Salazar, and other reporters in the Valley, where the UN is ordering and directing unnamed migrants to just be let in. Welcome back. Jakari Jackson and others are getting in place down in South Texas and McAllen, where the UN's running the illegal alien invasion. They actually selling news. The UN advised us. The UN comes in. They're illegal, and then we just put them on buses and ship them wherever they want. But when I came in from Isla Mujeres, took my children fishing for 5-6 days, they interrogated every one of them and asked them, what'd you buy, what'd you do, where'd you go? And the guy knew full well who I was. They had a big X on my little, computer printout when I went through that first. And as it does every time, and I got to be interrogated. But if I'd been wearing a burqa over my head, there wouldn't be any problem. And again, I'm not here to start some war with the Muslims. But if I can point out they've got rights I don't have, and that this whole thing's security theater, maybe I could get my freedoms back. Because all I see with this police state is domesticating me, that I have no rights, I have no freedoms, and I need to worship some all-powerful centralized government. And that's why I'm trying to get people self-sufficient. I'm trying to get folks to take action and get involved in their communities to take back our nation by being productive, by being honorable. Now, we're going to go to our reporters here in a few minutes, but Dr. Pieczenik, again, you're not just a pop psychologist. You're not just a psychiatrist, Harvard-trained, MIT, politics, you name it. I'm going to go over your whole pedigree for listeners, but it's very extensive, obviously. And they can't stand the fact you come on the show. I've been visited by the government about it. You've been visited. And then people say, well, why don't you tell us all about it? Well, you did put the subpoena online and talk about it and go through it all. I just sit there and just, leave it where it's at. And just laugh at people, basically, because all I'm doing is basic good stuff. I'm a good guy, and trying to save this country because I live here, my kids live here, and my ancestors lived here, and I just really, don't have it out for the average person. I just want to have a free nation. But look at the psychology of the sycophants, the Obamas, the Hillarys, and others. They just want to mount America's head on the wall. They really are after the bitter clingers. They really hate people that are independent of any race, color, or creed. They really do want to physically dominate what was Americana, even though that's what ends up generating the power of the nation that these parasites basically control and siphon off of and ride to global control. So I don't understand the schizophrenic behavior or the self-destructive behavior of them just seeming like they're out to get us. They even say they are when their internal memos come out. Is that correct? And just a few minutes on the psychology of these people, as somebody that wrote the book on State Department psychological operations, who helped get the Camp David Accord done, and so much more. You really are somebody that actually knows what's going on, not pop garbage. So just a brief synopsis of these people.
Well, number one, they're not crazy. Let's get it very clear, and your audience has to understand it. They're not schizophrenic. There's nothing psychotic about them. These are very willful, determined sociopaths, meaning that by definition they grew up not caring about guilt, responsibility, or accountability. So once you have that dynamic in there, you have entitlement. Once you have entitlement, that means that you should be voting for me. Then you go to pandering. The most, like Obama and Hillary and Bill Clinton, all have the same dynamic: sociopathy, lies of their histories, lies about their own self-identity, and basically they pander for favors. In turn, a system institution like the CIA or intelligence system can recruit them very quickly when they're young. It was done with Obama because he was black. His mother was an operative. His grandfather was, his grandmother. And the same thing with Bill Clinton and Mena and throughout.